Dear fellows, dear all, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to take part in the launch event of the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program of the University of Oulu. My name is Marko Mutanen and I'm leading the program. A couple of months ago we received wonderful news. Our proposals aiming at strengthening research of the Oulu University by focusing on the biodiversity loss and environmental change was evaluated an excellent one by the International Evaluation Panel. Overall, with 3 proposed new research programs, Oulu's application was ranked the second best among the proposals coming from the Finnish universities. It's my great pleasure now to formally open the Biodiverse Anthropocenes research program and invite you to participate in this event, as well as the program and its activities. Today, we will first have 4 interesting talks given by researchers of Oulu representing 4 different disciplines: medicine, education, archaeology and biology. After these talks, we will have a panel discussion on some timely topics and issues relevant to the program. Finally, the vice leader of the program, Roger Norum, will present final remarks. Please stay online. Biodiverse Anthropocenes is a program that aims at strengthening the Oulu University's strategic areas of research and support research profiling of the university. Research profiling funding mechanism dates back to 2015 when the Finnish government decided to deliver part of its financial support to the universities through the so-called research profiling calls, or profiles in short. The profile money is competed among the universities, and its purpose is to support universities in defragmentizing their research. By this funding mechanism, the universities were also forced to define and clarify their own focal areas of research. So did also our university. Our university recognized 5 focal areas of research. Biodiverse Anthropocenes speaks particularly to 2 of them. First, climate change and northern environment, and second, understanding humans in change. The focal areas of research of each university are designed to be permanent or at least long-term, but within them there are profiling areas that may develop faster. Biodiverse Anthropocenes is a program that expands the already established research profiling area of Arctic interactions and global change. This research profiling area, in turn, was established in Profi 4 call in 2017. What is the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program about? It's an innovative and transdisciplinary research initiative that brings together scholars from across the social and natural sciences to collaboratively investigate the biodiversity loss currently threatening the multi-species well-being and planetary sustainability, and to generate future-oriented solutions both in the Arctic and around the planet. Central to the program is to promote transdisciplinarity. In other words, to work between the disciplines, across the different disciplines and beyond each individual discipline. Scholars from biology, geography, history, anthropology, archaeology and educational sciences have together designed the program and its planned research activities. But we want to be maximally inclusive and welcome researchers from all disciplines of Oulu to join the program, as long as their research speaks to the program. The program spans over 6 years and ends to the end of 2026. The program is with the 8-member leadership team, including the vice leader Roger Norum from cultural anthropology, Heikki Helatera from biology, Vesa-Pekka Herva from archaeology, Elina Lehtomäki from education, Esa Ruuskanen from history, Jarkko Saarinen from geography, Anna-Kaisa Salmi from archaeology, and me. We have 2 co-coordinators, Laura Sirakusa and Emma Vatka. The total budget of the program is close to 8 million euro, of which 1/2 comes from the Academy of Finland and the other half is matching funding by the Oulu University. With this funding, we plan to implement a variety of activities which I will shortly sum up. But before I go to this, I want to highlight one additional important aspect of the program. Research profiling programs are not like usual research projects which typically strengthen research conducted in a single research group and often within a single discipline and with specific research questions to be addressed. Profiling programs have a much broader scope and are designed to strengthen all universities' research widely across disciplines as long as this research fits to the scope of the program. This means that the obtained money will be delivered in a transparent way to maximize the benefit of the participating research unit and the whole university, but particularly to advance the goals of the program. It's important to note that the focus of the program will be primarily on research. In other words, our main goal is to generate new scientific knowledge on biodiversity loss and environmental change, and together to find novel solutions to mitigate its effects and adapt to it. On that line, we have set a number of goals for our program. One of the more concrete goals we seek, for example, to increase the number and quality of publications and obtain more external research funding. We support public accessibility of research outcomes and strive increase of open access papers. We want to promote national and international collaboration. For example, we want to deepen strategic research collaboration with international consortia and initiatives on fields that are important to the program. We will organize citizen science workshops, conferences, and other events to increase public awareness on topics that we focus on. For more abstract goals, we will promote and financially support a development of transdisciplinary research projects across fields, disciplines and faculties. We tackle biodiversity challenges threatening multi-species well-being and inform about adaptation, mitigation and societal transformations for improved human-environment coexistence in the Arctic. We support generation of genomic and long-term data series. We will co-design methodological research tools and create innovative solutions for social resilience, sustainability and ethical practices. This is just to provide a few examples of our goals. Our overall goal is to create fertile grounds to the science renewal and scientific breakthroughs. There are many activities that we already have started implementing and others that we are starting later this year. As a major effort, we are very soon opening 4 tenure-track professorships. These positions represent areas of research that are central to the program, and each of them is with a transdisciplinary component within them. We hope these entirely new professorships to give a boost to the research of central topics to the program. Each tenure-track position will be supported with a generous starting package. Later this year, we will open a visitor program. With this program, we seek to promote both international collaboration and bring scholars representing different disciplines together. We will support both outgoing and incoming, and both shorter and longer term visits. We will also invest in order to upgrade the local research infrastructure, in particular molecular laboratories, to support genomics based on other research to support genomics-based and other research focusing on biodiversity. We also have already opened a call to support open access publication for our program's members. Finally, we will provide funding to hire postdoctoral researchers. The scholars affiliated to our program can take advantage of all these benefits, which will be communicated in a maximally transparent way. We welcome the members of the community to apply. We also encourage the scholars of the program to actively participate in various events and activities and provide their own ideas on how to develop the program further. With these words, I would like to welcome you all to follow this launch event and actively participating in the activities of the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program. For those who are not based in Oulu, please follow us on our university webpage and social media for the opportunities and collaboration and open positions. For those working in Oulu, please apply to become an affiliated member of the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program and participate actively in our exciting initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your opening words. We will now move to the first session of our launch event. Thank you very much, Marco, for your opening words. We will now move to the first session of our launch event today. We have 4 speakers who are members of the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program. And they will talk about their research and its relevance for the program. Our first speaker is Pauliina Rautio, who is Senior Research Fellow at the University of Oulu and Adjunct Professor of Education at the University of Helsinki. Her talk is entitled Public Engagement in Human-Animal Studies. Pauliina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a moment and I'll begin to share the screen. All right, so hi everyone. I'm very glad to be here. So I'm Pauliina Rautio, and I lead a research group that focuses on transdisciplinary research of human-animal relations. The rest of us are Tuomas Aivelo, Riikka Hohti, Antoni Kervinen, Maria Saari, and Ture Tammi. And between us, we represent education, ecology, biology or evolutionary biology in specific, as well as animal law. 2 of us also have degrees in the fields of arts, and 1 of us is an active musician in a really funky band. And in the future, there might be something brewing with our own Marko Mutanen from the Ecology and Genetics Research Unit here in Oulu. This talk is about public engagement, and I approach it from the viewpoint of our latest project, Citizens with Rats, or City Rats, which is a combination of multi-species education and ecological citizen science, and it's funded by the Academy of Finland. The direct interface for public engagement in our project is the citizen science approach, which means that it's engaging members of the public research of their surroundings. In City Rats, this means that young people who participate in the project take part in 3 stages of the study, and during stages, they get to work with natural scientists, human and social scientists, and then finally an artist, all the while producing new information with them collaboratively. In the first stage, the students and ecologists study the populations of our selected animal species, rats, in their communities. In the second stage, students and an urban anthropologist explore their communities ethnographically as their environments, but also simultaneously populated by other species. And in the third phase, the students work with the Finlandia-winning science fiction author Johanna Sinisalo, and they produce speculative visions for sustainable co-living in multi-species communities. This design is quite a classic example of public engagement in science. It produces new knowledge about a phenomenon with the help of participating citizens. In this view, the public is working with us and for us, and their engagement is welcomed by us researchers. A different kind of aspect of public engagement is working with public preconceptions and generalizations. This is when the public feels to us researchers as a group of stubborn lay people in need of education. In the case of human animal studies, or child animal studies in particular, the biophilia hypothesis is alive and kicking. Whenever we tell people we study children's relations to other animals, we hear a response of, "Aww," followed by anecdotes of people's favorite childhood pets or their child's amazing connection with the next door cat. The idea that children would possess somehow innately and authentically a special positive connection to other animals, as if by default, is very strong. Until recently, this has been the case with research as well. Most research on child-animal relations has been focused on pets or therapy animals and on the benefits that these relations have for human children. This means that the area of human-animal studies has seemed, on the surface, quite rosy and appealing. However, all the while the vast majority of everyday child-animal relations are indifferent, contradictory, or even hostile or exploitative. Hands up, those of you who are listening, who has, as a child, cut an earthworm in 2 or plucked the wings off from a fly. Public and media engagement in studies of humans and other animals is also different when the focus is on producing knowledge of the other animals, like in ecology, or when the attention is on some kind of measurable benefit to humans, like with immunology or measuring psychological impact or therapeutical effects. The media is keen to report good and easy news. Dogs in human families prevent allergies, or cat owners have a 30% lower risk of developing cardiovascular diseases. But when the focus is on less appealing human behavior towards other species, for example, in the context of industrial factory farming, the fur trade, or the decline of biodiversity due to human impact, then public engagement as well as research of it becomes viewed as somehow political and controversial. Media interest highlights and amplifies polarized discussions. And this public engagement for us researchers is of the frustrating kind, the kind that we really did not ask for. In our earlier research on child-animal relations, we've chosen to steer clear from a top-down approach and to listen to our public of interest, children and young people, engaging them in studying what matters to them in their significant animal relations. The children don't report just lovely and heartfelt events of attachment, but often quite the opposite. What fascinates children in other animals that they are in contact with are the difficulties of knowing what the other is thinking, what the other is feeling, and what they might want. Animal death and suffering are topics that most children don't avoid, as adults, parents, and teachers do. Sometimes children engage in thoroughly ethical wonderings, even about the pets in their own families, questioning the rights of humans to take pets to begin with when the animals do not have a say. Most importantly, the category animals is quite useless when studying what matters to children. It's particular animal individuals in the process of creating and sustaining a bond that matters. Children do not instinctively love all animals: cats, dogs, bunnies, lizards, snakes, parasitoid wasps, but some animals and on some conditions. And there's also a great deal of so-called unloved others. And other times, or for other children, animals are completely indifferent. This shows that when the public is engaged, not just for the purposes and by the means designed by researchers, but also from their own viewpoints, their impact on research and academic discussions is more substantial than just assisting in data collection. Citizen science is an approach quite directly engaging the public. As the slogan goes, for the people, by the people. In working with the members of the public not commonly engaged in citizen science, children and young people, and in suggesting that also other animals are understood as community members, we have been able to address public engagement also self-critically. The three commonly mentioned reasons for engaging the public in ecological citizen science projects are: first, easy and cheap data collection; second, means of educating the public; and third, access to local knowledge. In the cases where participating citizens are children or young people, the rationale for engaging that public is almost exclusively educational. Children are portrayed as objects of educational interventions, not as subjects and interested citizens of their communities. And other than human animals are portrayed as objects of data collection and knowledge production, rather than invested subjects as habitants in their living environments. In most citizen science projects, the public is engaged because it benefits science and is conducted from points, interests, and means designed in the academia. We researchers are happy as long as the people play by our rules. There's increasing political desire for research to engage people. This is seen as boosting democratic legitimacy and accountability, as well as transparency of governance. And as citizen science projects fit the bill, they're increasing. But are the projects really for the people, by the people? And in the case of ecological citizen science projects, how could other animals be accounted for as interested stakeholders and members of our biodiverse communities? When working towards our goal in City Rats and as a research group on how to evoke fellow feelings and support mutual aid within and between species, we absolutely need public engagement. The transdisciplinary combination of education and ecology, in the case of our project, is a response to the need to understand biodiversity not only factually and cognitively, but also to produce information of how feelings of affection and care emerge and can be supported. This cannot be achieved without public engagement, also on their terms, be they children, young people, or community members of other species, because engaging the public beyond using them as handy data collection aids will help and keep challenging our predetermined designs and requiring from us forever new sets of questions to pose. Thank you. This was my talk.
Setting off our launch with such a beautiful talk. We'll now move to the next speaker, Sami Kivela, who's Academy Research Fellow of Evolutionary Ecology. His talk is entitled Urbanization Affects the Evolution of Insect Seasonal Adaptations. Sami, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Can you see my screen? So I apologize that for some reasons I couldn't share with the full screen mode, so I will go forward like this. And I will tell you about a recent study done in my research group about the evolutionary consequences of urbanization. But I start from background information from insect seasonal adaptations. And these are adaptations that facilitate insects to match their life cycle in an appropriate way to the seasonal cycle. And this is important because winter in general is an adverse season for insects. And so they need some special adaptations to survive the winter. And a key adaptation in this respect is the diapause. That is a quiescent state where development is arrested and the insect can tolerate adverse conditions. And for example, in this example life cycle of the green-veined white butterfly shown here, it is the pupal stage that can enter diapause. And in that case, it overwinters and develops into adult butterfly only in the next year. But the pupal stage has also another option. It can develop directly into the adult butterfly within the same summer. So there are alternative developmental pathways of diapause and direct development. The induction of these developmental pathways takes place in relation to the environmental stimuli that indicate the phase of the seasonal cycle. And the day length is by far the most important seasonal cue that affects the induction of these developmental pathways. And that is because day length is a reliable seasonal cue, as indicated here by this diagram showing the annual day length variation in Helsinki. And in the latter part of the summer, when insects must make the switch from direct development to diapause, day length is generally getting shorter. So it's very useful source of information. The induction of the developmental pathways is probabilistic and can be described with the reaction norm. That is a function that indicates the probability of direct development, in this case in relation to day length. And under long day length conditions, direct development will be induced with a high probability because long day lengths indicate early summer conditions. On the other hand, short day lengths that occur later in the summer induce diapause with a very high probability. And this mechanism facilitates emergence of an extra generation without compromising survival over the winter, because diapause will anyway be induced in an appropriate time once the autumn and winter are approaching. But why then to produce an extra generation? The reason is simple, because the more generations can be completed during a summer, the higher is the number of descendants produced and the number of descendants that enter the next overwintering population. And even if you look at the genetic contribution to the next overwintering population, there's a dramatic increase in that with the increasing number of generations. So we can expect that whenever conditions are such that an extra generation can be successful, there should be selection for direct development. Let's then have a look how urbanization affects seasonality. What kind of consequences this form of anthropogenic change has. And one of the key consequences of urbanization is the urban heat island effect, which means that the urban environments have higher temperatures than the surrounding rural environments. And this temperature difference, indicated here with the delta T symbol, is high in magnitude in cities that are located at temperate or high latitudes. And this urban heat island effect and high temperature in the urban areas means that the growing season is longer in urban than in surrounding rural areas. And because insect development rate is highly temperature dependent, higher temperature in urban environments means that the insect development can proceed faster in such environments. On the other hand, urban environments are characterized by very intense artificial light at night time. And this artificial light may interfere with the interpretation of the day length information. And we might expect that the artificial light at night extends the perceived day length by the insects and the other organisms living in urban environments. And from these, we can predict how this reaction norm for the induction of the alternative developmental pathways would evolve in urban environments. So if we have this kind of a reaction norm in a rural population, so then an urban population that has adapted to urban heat island effect would have a reaction norm that has moved towards shorter day lengths. And this means that the switch from direct development to diapause would take place later in the season, facilitated by the longer growing season and faster development in urban environments. On the other hand, if the urban population adapts to artificial light at night, then we expect that the reaction norm would move towards longer day lengths. And this would be because the perceived day length is longer in the urban areas than in the rural ones. So maintaining the similar switch from direct development to diapause, like the timing of the switch in the urban population, would necessitate this kind of a change in the reaction norm. And so we tested these predictions by using Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths, as the study system. We focused on these two species, the geometric moth, Chiasmia glatrata, and the green-veined white butterfly, Pieris nabi. And these species were sampled from Helsinki and Stockholm and associated rural sites. Well, unfortunately, we could not get a sample of Chiasmia glatrata from rural site from Sweden, but otherwise we got samples from all those urban and rural environments. And then we took these animals to the laboratory and measured under controlled conditions the developmental pathway that was induced in their offspring under different day lengths. And here are the results. These results show the population-specific reaction norms measured in this laboratory experiment. And because this experiment was conducted under controlled constant conditions, all these differences are genetically based and indicate genetic differences among the populations. And what is interesting is that if you compare the urban and rural populations in both city regions and both species, there's a consistently change so that the urban population has a reaction norm that has been moving towards shorter day lengths than the corresponding rural population. And this is consistent with the predicted urban heat island effect on the reaction norm evolution. So next we wanted to check if these evolutionary changes in the reaction norms in these populations would reflect in the flight periods of these species in the field. And for that purpose, we compiled long-term citizen size data from 3 biggest cities and surrounding rural areas from Finland and Sweden. And if you look at the duration of the flight period that is shown in the upper panels of the figures, in both species and in many cities, the flight period is longer in urban than in rural areas. And this is the case especially in the cities of Helsinki and Stockholm, from which we have experimental data. So these changes in the flight period are consistent with the observed reaction norm evolution in those cities. And the same is true if we look at the end of the flight season, like the last flight day during the day, that is presented in the lower row of the figure. And again, in most cities, the flight season ends later in the urban areas compared to the surrounding rural ones. And this is the case, again, particularly in Helsinki and Stockholm. So we really can see the changes in flight period that are implied by those observed evolutionary changes in the reaction norms of these populations. And from these results, we can conclude that the 2 study species have evolved adaptations to changes in seasonality in the urban environment that are likely because of the urban heat island effect. And it may be so that this kind of adaptations to the urban heat island effect are quite widespread among insect species and in different cities. On the other hand, we found no signs of evolution in relation to the artificial light at night. But this doesn't mean that the artificial light at night would not be of evolutionary significance. It may well affect the evolution of some other traits or in some other species or in some other cities. And so further studies in this are necessary. And my take-home message here is that we need to remember that urbanization is a very extreme form of anthropogenic environmental change, and it is also very recent in evolutionary timescale. And so it is necessary to understand the evolutionary consequences of the urbanization if we want to understand what kind of long-term ecological consequences it may have, for example, on biodiversity. And on the other hand, whenever there's evolution taking place in urban environments, it means that it creates new genetic variation within species, which means increase in biodiversity at this level. But also I want to highlight that many, or if not most, species are not able to persist in urban environments. So there's a major loss of species from urban environments, which has a very negative biodiversity consequences at this level of biodiversity. And finally, I want to, of course, express my warmest thanks to all the people who have been participating in this study, all my co-authors and collaborators and people assisting in the lab work, and of course Academy of Finland for funding this study. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sami. And just to reassure you, the videos was perfect and we could see the slides very well. Also, I would like to say that from these first couple of talks, we can see the variety and diversity of questions that we address in the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program. And there'll be more of that. In fact, the next talk by Associate Professor of Archaeology Anna-Kaisa Salmi is entitled Long-Term Changes and Continuities in Reindeer Herding, an attempt at transdisciplinary archaeological practice. Anna-Kaisa, please.
So thank you, Laura, and I will now try to share my screen with you. Okay, so good morning. My name is Anna-Kaisa Salmi, and I am an associate professor in archaeology, and I'm specialized in zooarchaeology, which means the study of past human-animal relationships. My presentation today focuses on the relationships between people and one animal species in particular, the reindeer, to demonstrate how past and present human-animal relationships are linked through continuation of practice, and how these issues can be approached through archaeological methodologies. As we know, reindeer herding is an important livelihood in the north, and reindeer herding is in a state of change today because of changing land use, climate change, technology, as well as economic and demographic factors. The rapid change of today is often contrasted with so-called traditional reindeer herding, which is seen as something ancient and unchanging. But it's important to notice that reindeer herding has in fact always changed in dynamic interaction with social, economic, and environmental factors. The roots and changing practices of reindeer herding can be approached by the means of archaeological research. The study of ancient reindeer herding and the origins of reindeer domestication are complicated fields of study because of the tangled and varied nature of human-reindeer interactions, such as wild reindeer hunt, reindeer herding, and the surrounding society. However, archaeological research can reveal long-term changes and continuities in reindeer herding practices. And it can also be used to reveal multi-species histories and especially highlight the role of non-human animals in histories that have usually been told from the human point of view. The archaeology of reindeer domestication and reindeer herding has been a focus of a research project that I am leading. The project has been going on for a little more than 3 years in total now, and the research team consists of 13 people. Our approach is multi- and transdisciplinary with 3 specific aims. First, we try to create archaeological tools for identification of reindeer domestication and reindeer herding practices in the archaeological record. The second aim is to conduct participant interviews among reindeer herders to understand the nature of human-reindeer interaction in certain reindeer herding practices. And the third goal is to apply these methods and approaches to archaeological material to understand the long-term development of reindeer herding in northern Fennoscandia. The project therefore utilizes methods and approaches from several fields for understanding evolution of reindeer herding. The methods range from participant interviews to bioimaging methods, analysis of ancient DNA and stable isotopes, to landscape archaeology. Today, I am going to focus on a specific aspect of reindeer herding, the use of working reindeer, and show how these different methods and approaches can come together to create new understandings of the development of reindeer herding practices and the associated frames of thinking about non-human animals. As a historical point of departure, it has been suggested that draught reindeer were an important part of early reindeer herding, and perhaps even a driver of early reindeer domestication. The earliest piece of historical evidence of reindeer domestication, the story of Ottar, from the 9th century, has even been translated by some researchers to indicate the use of working reindeer. However, solid archaeological evidence on this has been lacking. In later historical sources and ethnographies, the important role of draught and cargo reindeer for the everyday tasks and mobilities of Sami societies is clear. Draught reindeer were used to carry and pull people and their things during different seasonal and other mobilities. In the latter half of the 20th century, draught reindeer use and training decreased and began to be replaced with cars, horses, or motor sledges as means of different mobilities. However, the tradition has begun to revive today as reindeer are trained for the purposes of tourism and competitive racing. To understand the changes and continuities in draught reindeer use and training, we have been talking to reindeer herders, collecting information on the training and use of draught reindeer, both in terms of the technology and the relationships and interactions embedded in working together. We have also collected the skeletal remains of working reindeer at the end of their careers to create osteological methods for identification of ancient working reindeer from archaeological bone finds. We have analyzed both modern and ancient reindeer skeletons with multiple methodologies such as bioimaging, geometric morphometrics, and analysis of paleopathological lesions related to working stress. Here in the picture, researchers from my team are CT scanning reindeer bones to obtain information of their morphology and structure in relation to physical activity patterns such as working. And we have some really cool results suggesting that the bone morphology changes as a reaction to working and also as a reaction to other activities. In this graph, we see how working reindeer humerus differs from non-working reindeer of different sexes, subspecies, and activities in terms of shape variation. So this makes it possible to identify ancient working reindeer in the archaeological material. We can also identify working based on paleopathology, which means the study of ancient diseases. Working causes typical patterns of pathological changes in the skeleton, such as joint disease in particular parts of the reindeer skeleton. Here are some typical changes, joint disease of the vertebrae. Also, hooves and ankles of the reindeer are typically affected by joint disease in working reindeer. Applying these methods to archaeological materials from Finnish Lapland, dating from the 14th to the 18th centuries, we obtained some really nice results. We noticed that the skeletal elements typically affected by pathological lesions in modern working reindeer were also affected in the archaeological assemblages. And the oldest bones with such pathologies dated to the 14th century. Other parameters we studied of the archaeological assemblages suggested that draught reindeer were trained and used in Finnish Lapland, at least from the 14th century onwards, as a part of a mixed subsistence strategy of small-scale reindeer herding, hunting, and fishing. Earlier use of working reindeer is, of course, possible, but so far we have not been able to analyze bone assemblages dating prior to the 14th century, but that will be on the agenda later. Our interview data shows that today reindeer are selected for draught training based on their appearance and physical abilities, but first and foremost for their personality. The characteristics and personalities of reindeer selected for different purposes can differ, as for instance, reindeer intended for tourism should be calm, whereas racing reindeer can be more volatile persons. The training of the reindeer is interspecies communication and learning, where personality plays an important role, and reindeer personhood clearly comes into play. The use of draught reindeer and the associated tradition decreased from the 1950s onwards when working reindeer were replaced in various tasks by horses, cars, and motor sledges. However, the Lapland tourism boom since the 1980s and 90s brought working reindeer back with the need for draught animals for reindeer safaris. Today, working reindeer training combines traditional knowledge, which was almost lost in the latter half of the 20th century, with modern requirements. People who work with reindeer feel that working reindeer training and use maintain close relationships with the reindeer, continue traditions, support reindeer herding as a livelihood, and create activities that bring together generations and different reindeer herding cooperatives. So, in conclusion, the combination of different perspectives and methodologies into the study of changing reindeer herding practices can enable the identification of domesticated reindeer and ancient reindeer herding practices in the archaeological record. It can also enable speculation on the nature of human-reindeer relationships in the past, as the interspecies learning and communication experiences, although embedded in contemporary frames of thinking about non-human animals, must have included similar practices, perceptions, and sensory experiences as today. They also reveal the long-term dynamics in reindeer herding practices and the interplay of change, continuity, and meaning-making in them. And finally, they remind us on the importance of reindeer as participants and active agents in human histories. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anna-Kaisa, for your fascinating talk as well. We're now moving to the last talk of the first session of our launch event. We have Professor of Public Health, Jouni Jaakkola, whose paper is entitled Biodiversity and Human Health. Jouni, please.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me. So I would first like to thank for the lead of the Biodiverse Anthropocene for the opportunity to present a health perspective to the field of biodiversity research. I am also complimenting the directors for the novel co-creative approach for the emerging research program and profile of the university. So I am a professor of public health and director of the Center for Environmental and Respiratory Health Research. I am also hosting a World Health Organization collaborating center in global change, environment, and public health. So I am one of the lead scientists of the Biodiverse Anthropocene, and my background is medicine. But I have conducted research on environmental determinants of health in several international settings, and also complemented my studies with doctoral studies in epidemiology and biostatistics at McGill University. And my special interests include climate change, weather and air pollution, and health. And this links me to the issues of biodiversity and health, as I will show. So my presentation covers the following topics: escalating human pressure and drivers of biodiversity loss, pathways linking to biodiversity to human health and well-being, a question of how to measure biodiversity, how to assess the effects of biodiversity on human health. And finally, I will present the research framework of my own research center and a couple of examples of ongoing research that links to issues of biodiversity. There is escalating human pressure on global environment, as shown by this Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which presented a framework how ecosystem impairment leads to various health impacts. This figure illustrates climate change and biodiversity loss as collateral processes driven by same factors, human pressures. And the health effects can be direct, indirect, mediated by ecosystem changes, or deferred and mediated by changes in socioeconomic structures. So here is a recent framework actually published just a few weeks ago for pathways linking biodiversity to human health and well-being. So there are 4 domains of pathways marked gray boxes in the figure, which involve contact with biodiversity. First, biodiversity may reduce harm by reducing harmful exposures such as heat or air pollution, which may increase mortality or disease episodes. Second, exposure to biodiversity may increase risk of allergies, infectious diseases, or microbiota. That's the opposite end. Third, contact with nature may restore human psyche and enable stress recovery, and for example, reduce high blood pressure, which has lots of positive health impacts. And fourth, nature may encourage the physical activity or mental transcendent experiences, and in this way lead to improved health and well-being. And finally, biodiversity may reduce harm without even having individual contact, for example, by reducing urban level air pollution in larger areas. So you don't even have to be in touch with the nature for benefiting the surrounding nature. The effects of contact with biodiversity are modified by environmental and socio-cultural context. For example, accessibility to nature or perceived safety in the nature may influence the positive or negative effect of nature. And also individual characteristics such as age, gender, socioeconomic position, or ecological knowledge may modify these effects. So there is a varying amount of empirical evidence to support these causal pathways presented in this framework, but I hope that this framework will stimulate further empirical research. The definition and measurement of biodiversity for the assessment of effects on health and well-being may be challenging, especially if we are interested in exposure over longer time periods. We can measure the actual biodiversity at a location, or we can measure perceived biodiversity. There are various remote sensing methods, for example, for the assessment of land cover from satellite data, even retrospectively from the 70s on. But anyway, this is an area that needs development and transdisciplinary collaboration, and I'm really looking forward to this type of collaboration within this profile program. So I will now present the framework of our research program, which was established in 2009. So the focus of the program is on the health effects of global change, with a special interest in climate change and collateral biodiversity loss. But as discussed, both of these are driven by overlapping drivers. So this framework indicates different causal pathways, how global may influence the risk of main public health diseases as well as health and well-being in general, such as asthma and allergies, respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, or even adverse pregnancy outcomes due to exposures during a prenatal period. It is important to understand that this framework is like a puzzle. So different pieces can be studied with different approaches, but the big picture forms from the results of these different approaches as well as creative inference from the results. So we apply epidemiologic, clinical, genetic, and experimental studies, as well as conduct meta-analysis, burden of disease assessment, and make climate change scenario-based projections, for example, of mortality with respect to temperature changes during this century. I am next going to present recent research results from two studies related to biodiversity and health. So the first one, called Multi-City, Multi-Country Collaborative Network, studies the associations between weather, air quality, and mortality in global scale. The network has currently data from 43 countries and over 750 locations mapped here, and covers over 100 million deaths over the past 3 decades. So we have published series of papers on the effects of suboptimal temperature on total and cause-specific mortality. We have shown that both heat and cold increase mortality, and so the temperature mortality can be expressed as a U or J-shaped curve. So in a recent study, we assessed how urban characteristics affect vulnerability to heat and cold. And the figure on the right shows the effect of 19 urban characteristics on the effects of heat and cold on total mortality. So the effect estimates on the negative side of 0 indicate a reduction in the adverse effects and vice versa. And so we found that the effects of heat on mortality were higher in cities characterized by fewer green space. So this corresponds to the framework presented by Marcel and colleagues that I showed earlier, that indicating that this reducing harm as a link from biodiversity to human health is actually present, and it is seen at global level. My other example illustrates the causing harm domain as a pathway from biodiversity to human health. So we studied quite recently associations between airborne pollen concentration and daily mortality from respiratory and cardiovascular causes. As we know, global warming is influencing the pollen both qualitatively and quantitatively by, for example, influencing the duration of pollen seasons and changing our contact with pollen. And of course, we know about the allergic effect of exposure to pollen, well known and suffered by 20–30% of the population. But our findings here indicate for the first time that the abundant level of alder increases both respiratory and total mortality within an induction period of 1–2 weeks. And mugwort levels were also found to associate with mortality from cardiovascular causes. So finally, I would like to present a request for collaboration with the members of the Biodiverse Anthropocene network. Please think about how we could join forces and expertise to further elaborate the pathways from biodiversity to human health. So I established a population-based cohort study in 1991 in the city of Espoo among the children born 1984 to 91, and so they are now in their 30s. The main objective was to study the effects of environmental exposures on the development of asthma and allergies and respiratory infections. So in collaboration with the Finnish Meteorological Institute, we have modeled individual level lifetime and time-specific exposures to various air pollutants, as well as meteorological factors, and studied their effects on health. So as an example, so we recently published a series of articles which show adverse effects of air pollution during pregnancy on the risk of both preterm birth and low birth weight, which themselves are predictors of future health. For example, we show both independent and synergistic effects of exposure to fine particulate matter as well as ozone on the risk of preterm birth, as shown in these figures. So the future questions include, does land cover or biodiversity influence the risk of preterm birth per se? Or can neighborhood greenness or biodiversity reduce the adverse effects of air pollution, as it did in the global study of the effects of heat on mortality? And how to characterize current and past greenness in the neighborhood? So I'm really interested in any novel approaches for measuring parameters of biodiversity and related parameters in this context. So please contact me with any ideas and we can discuss about collaboration. So in summary, there is an escalating human pressure on global nature, causing dramatic changes such as climate change and biodiversity loss. And there is also increasing evidence that biodiversity may influence human health and well-being. And so we are conducting a research program on global change, environment, and public health. And we are really enthusiastic about new possibilities of intellectual interaction and research collaboration in this area of research. And finally, I would like to congratulate the directors and members for the launch of the Biodiverse Anthropocene with high expectations. Thank you very much.
Joni, thank you very much. Also for inviting other members of the program to collaborate and look for possible solutions to today's challenges together. Right, so with your talk, we're actually ending the first session of the launch event. We are moving into the pop-up studio of the University of Oulu, in the center of Oulu. And we have organized for that a roundtable discussion to dig deeper into some of the issues and questions that will be addressed in the next 6 years within the program. We have invited 3 members of the management group of the Biodiverse Anthropocenes programs. So we have Elina Lehtomäki, Professor of Education. We have Heikki Helantera, Associate Professor of Evolutionary Biology. And then we have also Vesa-Pekka Herva, Professor of Archaeology. Welcome to our discussion. We will start with a question that I'm going to address to all of you. Probably we can start with Elina. So if you could briefly talk about your research and how it tackles questions related to the human impact on the global Earth system and ecosystems.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here for the launch event discussion. And I think in relation to what we heard from the previous presenters, I think the important thing is to understand also what is the change, what changes, what constitutes transformation in our systems, in our behavior. And as a behavior, we can also look at individuals, as we often do in education, but I think broader so. I come from the educational sciences, so my research really focuses on how do we learn sustainability as responsibility. I've been doing research on university changes, university students' perceptions, teacher education students' perceptions of, how they connect to the world, how they understand the world. And more recently also chairing the University of Oulu Sustainability Working Group, where we are preparing a plan to actually transform the organization to be more responsible, to enact in a responsible way. So I think the pleasure of collaborating in a transdisciplinary research program is also to make research understood. It requires communication across different disciplines. It requires us to understand each other. Not everything maybe, because we are all experts in our own fields. My special interest in this is how do we understand the biodiversity loss? How do we understand climate change? And how do we understand all this, how it affects, and how we need to change our not only individual, but also social and institutional level behavior.
Thank you, Elina. And Heikki, what would be your take on this?
Yeah, so I study evolution, and I mean, evolution is not just about slow genetic adaptation and speciation and very, very long time frame processes. Evolution is a process where organisms fit to their environment, and there are many ways to fit to your environment. Either genetic adaptation that is slow, there are mechanisms like plasticity and learning that enable organisms to thrive in their environment. There are very sort of hot topics in current genetics and biology, like epigenetics and maternal effects. There are multiple timescales of how to respond to your environment, and the balance of these varies a lot between different organisms, different environments, different traits, and of course now the change is faster than what organisms are usually adapted to. And evolutionary biology has a lot to offer in figuring out how these responses will pan out. And then I think there are also concepts that are something that are usable in different disciplines, and different disciplines have concepts that evolutionary biologists should think about when thinking about how does anything fit to their environment, especially if the environment is changing very rapidly and the organism itself is contributing to the change. So there are multiple ways back and forth from biology to other disciplines. So I'm looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And already a key word here is change, as you and Elina have addressed. And Vesa-Pekka, what would be your answer to this question?
Yes, well, archaeology is I guess often associated with the study of very old things, but it can actually be understood in much broader terms, where archaeology is about studying and understanding the interaction between humans and the material world. And one of the things about the Anthropocene, for instance, no matter how we sort of define it and where we started, or where we sort of place the beginning of this era, one of the major sort of developments about this era is that the amount of material culture, like human created landscape and human created things, has been increasing like really explosively, especially after the industrialization. So my sort of view on this whole program and what we are doing is basically, on the one hand, sort of trying to understand very sort of long term, like centuries and thousands of years of developments, but especially from the perspective of what things like artifacts and human created environments, how they change our relationship with the world in general. So this is my sort of general take on it. A little bit more specifically, my own sort of special interest at the moment is especially, shall we say, hidden or this kind of invisible worlds, especially things like the underground world. That what sort of role underground world plays in contemporary and past worlds, and it's very sort of clear in a way that mining, for instance, extractive pursuits, they have been changing the world and human culture for thousands of years, and it's especially sort of important now, but it is invisible in the sense that we don't often think about these things, that what is the sort of the significance, cultural significance, and other sort of significance and impacts of this kind of like extractive pursuits.
And already now we see a variety of disciplines coming into dialogue. So maybe the next question would be really about this program and what makes you enthusiastic about taking part in it. Maybe we can start from Vesa-Pekka and then we'll come back to Heikki.
Sure. Well, archaeology is by definition, or I don't know if it's by definition, but in practice anyway, it is very sort of interdisciplinary pursuit. It's a kind of humanistic social science like framework where it operates, but it has been since many decades ago. It has been very sort of prominently using like natural scientific methods, and in that sense sort of collaborated very closely with different fields of not only natural sciences but other sciences as well. But often the thing is that there is either archaeologists are contributing to some specifically say natural scientific sort of question somehow, or the other way around, archaeologists are just using the data and results and research that other fields are producing. So what I find exciting about this program is that it provides this kind of longer term and in a way maybe sort of more even arena for encounters, that it isn't just this study and what sort of comes out of that specific collaboration, but that it really is a sort of place for doing deeper discussion and having our assumptions and presumptions and things like that also kind of questioned, which I think will in a way take this kind of collaboration to the next level.
Perfect. Yes. Elina?
Yes, I think what attracts certainly is this transdisciplinarity. And I think like in the field of educational sciences, we need to also apply concepts and approaches from other scientific fields. But then at the same time, I think the big responsibility is that we are to look at education systems, and we reach the biggest cohorts in any system, maybe in addition to health and maybe even business and leadership studies. But we do reach generations over a long time, so we actually can have influence and societal impact. But also we need to do research on societal impact, and then see also how people get involved and engaged in research, how they apply research results. So we are not always applying it also, but we need to understand how it can be applied. And I think this kind of transdisciplinarity and this dialogue, we can certainly learn so much from each other over the process, as we have done already in the planning phase. And then I see that we can also envision. We can understand the history, the past and the present, but and also then gaze to the future, because we are to be concerned about the future. And we do know that we have young people having anxiety, our students being anxious about the climate change. People who are aware and observe biodiversity don't have explanations. We as a research community, we need to have the responses to some of the questions, but also to learn to ask new questions and also sort of understand our limits. And I think this kind of transdisciplinarity stretches our capacities also to communicate and understand, and also then to get involved in sort of the broader connections. We do need to understand our planet and to understand what is that we do and what are our responsibilities related to that. So this is what I'm really interested in Anthropocenes, biodiversity Anthropocenes. And I think we have had this dialogue going on throughout the planning, and we need to continue, but then with research. And how do we do that? We'll see.
Yes. Heikki?
Well, I'm always looking for new things to think about, new questions to ask. Like Elina said, that's what makes scientific research exciting and interesting. I'm interested in seeing where evolutionary logic applies and where it doesn't apply. trying to apply evolutionary logic outside biology, there's a limit somewhere, obviously. Sometimes that limit comes very fast, and that tells me a lot about how evolution works by seeing that, okay, it doesn't apply here. This is a fundamentally different system. That tells me something about biological evolution. That's my personal view. Then more broadly, I think evolution produces very exciting things. Adding the evolutionary logic of nature into teaching biology, educating about biology, instead of just describing this is this animal, this is this plant. There's a lot of excitement to add, and that excitement breeds interest and caring about things. So it's I think evolution as a story has a lot to add to education in biology as well.
Yeah, and I would actually think that one of the things about this whole program is that we have all these, like, say, of course we know that science has been very sort of it's been very specialized or become very sort of specialized over the last 200 years or so. And we are also, I think, kind of reaching the limits of that. So in order to understand and kind of respond to this kind of changes or things like climate change, for instance, we really need to sort of, we all have our sort of disciplinary systems or something like that, and we need to start mapping how to sort of put them together and where they sort of apply. Like Heikki was saying, what are the sort of the limits, but also what are the possibilities of combining these different sort of views and different in a way sort of systemic thinkings, and yeah, I think it's very interesting and exciting, certainly.
And so in this sense, if we take this question of transdisciplinarity maybe a little bit more philosophically, how do you understand cooperation more generally? So what is cooperation for you? Elina, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, what a challenging question. You can see cooperation here, certainly. And I think the entire biodiversity Anthropocene, since we have what we have done is we have brought all these different perspectives together and conducted dialogue. And then I think the collaboration has been throughout the process, the planning process already in place. And we do continue that. And what is cooperation? What is collaboration? Then we go to, really to philosophy, certainly. And I think it requires dialogue. It requires negotiations. It requires also that we are able to sort of see issues from different perspectives. And I think, like both of my colleagues here mentioned, that is what we have done. And I think this is something that we do need. Like you mentioned, that we do need that because we need these different sort of knowledges in order to understand the world better. Science essentially is about sense making sense of the world. But then where we could be better is often science communication, research communication. How do we make scientific knowledge understandable for larger, wider audience? And then how do we engage them? That is the way to contribute to change. And how do we, so we are now celebrating the research-based year. Here in Finland, scientific knowledge is emphasized by the academia and by universities in collaboration. And that requires, I think, bigger contributions and then also engaging people in the scientific processes to understand how is it that we produce the knowledge. And that is what Heikki mentioned earlier, that we are to engage people also to understand where does this knowledge come from. And that does not mean that everybody has to be a researcher as such. Research knowledge is something you need to go deep into issues. But then we can improve our capacities of collaboration by engaging people also to understand how knowledge is created, and then how processes are happening, and reasons behind different things, and that helps us, I think, in collaboration. And we have evidence that citizen science type of approaches have sort of created interest also in science career, but also in scientific knowledge. And knowledge requires also that we communicate it clearly as we can.
Yeah, I think that from a sort of slightly philosophical point of view, this is really a question that we need to sort of pursue within this program. That it isn't always sort of obvious what is the good and best ways of collaborating and what collaboration actually even means. So I think that we really need to it is kind of an adventure and sort of a process of discovery to find out within this fantastic and very sort of diverse group of people and disciplines what can be done in terms of collaboration. And it also kind of nicely echoes, if I continue a little bit with this philosophical strain, with the very sort of basic I guess idea of biodiverse Anthropocenes that is about co-inhabiting the world, the ways of co-inhabiting the world with between humans and all kinds of non-human things. They are animals, they are plants, they can be imaginary beings, but we do share this world. So that is also a kind of sort of collaboration and this kind of interaction and understanding these the way things kind of work and the dynamics of things, both in terms of this kind of concrete collaboration, but also on the level of how the world works is one of the things about this program, I think.
Yeah, I mean, still continuing with this sort of more conceptual and philosophical angle, but also reflecting my own background. I mainly study social evolution, or that's my key interest, and there cooperation is a very central topic, and the sort of the messages arising from there apply to this situation as well. Successful cooperation needs two things. It needs alignment of interests. There's a joint goal that helps to keep the sort of selfish interests at bay. There is a goal that everybody agrees on, and the other thing is synergies, division of labor, different kinds of approaches and questions and methods coming together that makes the collaboration more efficient. And I think this is a great opportunity to sort of explore the places where these synergies could come from. They could come from unexpected places and produce big benefits, and clearly the shared goal is already there, so the groundwork is done. Now we just need to find the synergies.
Perfect. And in fact, maybe pushing this a little bit forward, what could be the challenges of doing transdisciplinary work and collaborating together? How do you see this? Where would you see some of the challenges? And maybe how do you think this could be overcome?
Well, I think one of the challenges is the unpredictability. You don't know where the successful synergies come from. So there has to be a lot of space for people to discuss their ideas and approaches, because you never know whose approach and whose questions and topics and data sets will be something that this is exactly what we need. This is where we can apply our thinking from my field as well, and vice versa. So exploring the space of different possibilities, I think, is the challenge, but it's also the fun
An exciting
part.
one, yes. Yeah. Elina, what would your opinion be? What could be some of the challenges?
Yeah, this is a good question. What are the challenges? I think we have experienced some of them already, maybe because some of the terminology that in ecology or social ecology, archaeology, or also in learning sciences, educational sciences, we may use may be different, and we may need to explain them. We may have to sort of explain in more detail, interpret, and then also see how do my colleagues understand what I'm suggesting. If I talk about transformative learning systems, and if I talk about some leadership approach models, I don't have to expect everybody to be aware. I come from educational sciences, so easily everybody thinks I'm an expert, because all of us, we have gone through education systems, different types, maybe different eras. But now if we combine all this, then when we look at systemic approaches and we learn from each other how different processes function, I think we can sort of really widen our perspectives. While at the same time, that does not mean that we leave our sort of deeper expertise in our own fields. I think it's still important we do have field-specific also backgrounds and understandings, conceptualizations and approaches even. But I think there's quite a lot that we need to and we have to. And my favorite figure has been represented by a medical journal, Lancet. The Lancet published an article on sustainability where they put sustainability at the core, they put well-being, and all different types of sustainable development goals that are related to that could be related to health and education, different types of things, and then structures around them. If we enjoy well-being, we are able to then build infrastructures like a research program. If we then can communicate and have the interaction going on, and then we are able to take care of our environment and the wider world, including humans and non-humans, these multi-species environments. And I think this explains also what we need to do is we need to sort of understand and organize the world in a way through our different disciplines, but then certainly also to see that, where is our limits? Where are the limits that I can't? Through education, I don't understand certain things, but I have my colleagues from different fields who have then understanding of these things, how they influence also, for instance, education systems or our perceptions of learning and education. And this constant interaction is in place in our environments. And why don't we apply some of the models that are available there and then understand it also from the perspective of different systems?
Yeah. Well, I see this whole collaboration thing and its challenges as an opportunity to learn something, learn something new. And in my sort of previous experience, even though of course I haven't really been working in this kind of a very sort of large program with so many sort of different people with so many different backgrounds, but I've always collaborated with people. I've been always interested in all kinds of things. I mean, the kinds of things that are not necessarily about archaeology, and what I find very sort of rewarding about that is that you kind of never know where the adventure takes you. So kind of going back to what Heikki was saying, that I think that this whole in a way that exploring the different dimensions of collaboration is kind of a goal in itself. But as the challenges, I think that this is very much a question of translations, but not in a very sort of superficial sense, but also in much deeper sense where we need to understand each other's like disciplinary assumptions, for instance, that we can like put things together and different say data sets and different methods and whatnot. But I think that more sort of genuine or kind of deeper level, in a way, collaboration requires that we have a deeper understanding of how we think within different disciplines. So this kind of deeper levels of translations is probably one of the challenges.
And can you give us examples on how you've been working across disciplines in your research?
Well, I've been working quite a lot across disciplines because, again, archaeology is by nature multi sort of disciplinary. But for instance, I've been studying Arctic mining, extractive industries over the last few years. Not only that, but it has been in a prominent role. So my or our starting point has been very much contemporary and future issues, which we try to understand from the perspective of the past or in this kind of a longer sort of term perspective. So it means that we have been like talking to people that doing this kind of ethnographic anthropological work, while at the same time looking at historical sources, people who actually know this stuff. Then we've been exploring the actual sort of sites of interest, like mines and mining landscapes. So at least that. So we've been combining ethnographic and anthropological sort of perspective and materials. Then like material culture perspective, historical documentation. But there isn't really, of course, this kind of a recipe how to put these things together. So it is kind of a context and case dependent, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe taking also this transdisciplinarity a little bit further, Heikki, I would also like to hear you comment on, collaboration between biologists, for example, and the humanities and social sciences, and if this kind of collaboration is something that's emerging, that's developing at the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, there are certain areas of biological research that for a long time have overlapped or been in close contact with other fields like biological anthropology and a lot of like evolutionary biology and ecology and environmental sciences have for a very long time had a very strong interaction with philosophers of science, which has been, I think, very productive for both fields. Then, of course, areas like microeconomics and behavioral ecology are sometimes approaching each other very much. We are at the moment ourselves working on a project funded by the Kone Foundation, collaborating with social and political scientists, where we are sort of exploring whether evolutionary theories have anything to give to resource management problems in different human situations, and how shared resources are used, ranging from city garden boxes to forestry and fisheries and even sort of international level questions, which is which is really exciting. So we are sort of taking some of the classic Elinor Ostrom's work on socio-ecological systems and seeing whether or not evolutionary biology has some concepts to offer, which has been a very exciting exciting journey. And then, I don't know, this might reflect my own ignorance, but those were the more maybe traditional approaches. But what Pauliina mentioned in her presentation to me sounds very novel and exciting. It might be that I just haven't been exposed to that before this program, but at least to me that sounded like a genuinely new direction to take, and I was really happy to hear that, and looking forward to hearing to hearing more. And of course Annaka's work as well. The genetic methods are pushing biological approaches into archaeology and other areas as well, where suddenly DNA data is available in places where some decades ago everybody thought it would be impossible. So that's of course another new and exciting area.
Yeah, and of course, as you were saying already in the presentation, they were hinting also at engaging with the public. So thinking about cooperation, not only among scholars from different disciplines, but also reaching out to the public. So maybe, Elina, you can expand a little bit at this, on this. How important is it to engage with the public and communicate the results of scholarly work to the more general public?
That's very, very important. Though I think we find it difficult to create indicators for that. Is communication what we are doing now? Yes, we have a pop-up sort of discussion, and we do talk about our research, how actively we engage, and what are the forms of doing that. I know that in communication research, people are studying that also, how to do it effectively. And so that's again one area where we need to collaborate, also those who know how to do it well and who are doing research on that. And then if you think about public engagement, we can certainly, like I said earlier, we have, for instance, the entire education system where we reach more or less the entire population. And the same also is true for health sector. So I think we have sectors that we need to collaborate across, and then engage people. But in what ways and how do we do that better? That's something we need to also investigate throughout the program that we do have. And luckily we have 6 years time. And I think what is important is that we have active engagement, because transformation of any systems, any institutions as well, requires also individuals' interest and curiosity. And that is something like we talked earlier, we do share the sort of aim and we do share the curiosity. And can we be enthusiastic about the topic so that we also get others and encourage others to participate. We do have tools, we do have IT, we have media, we have communication research. So how extensively we use all that. And then we do have also citizen science experiments. Some have been successful, some less successful. So could we learn from the successful ones what made them successful and how people sort of got enthusiastic about scientific research? These are things we need to find out through the project.
And more generally then, what do you think? How does this program, the Biodiverse Anthropocenes program, contribute to the Oulu community, to the university at Oulu? Vesa-Pekka.
Well, I would think that, at least I hope that it will be one of this kind of, shall we say, powerhouses for boosting or improving. Well, I would say boosting really this kind of non-obvious collaboration between different fields of science. So I think that will be one of I hope that this will be one of the sort of the benefits to the university community. It's and it's, I think Oulu University is a kind of a natural home for this, also in the sense that we are a big university. But at the same time, my experience has always been that people are very sort of easy to approach. People get excited and interested, and that way, this kind of surprising, sometimes surprising connections have formed between, I don't know, say archaeology and business studies, for instance, which maybe not appear as the most obvious collaboration, but I find it easy that there is like a great ground at Oulu University for this kind of stuff, and this program hopefully will take it one step further.
Elina?
Yes, and I think what is characteristic to Oulu, what draw me to Oulu, is certainly at the same time being local and international. And I think we have a sort of international research community, international connections, networks in all different disciplines. And then at the same time, we are close to the nature. And we do have the specific task as an Arctic university and with the Arctic networks. So this is something that we need to emphasize in our approaches, but it's also something that we could consider as an attractive sort of factor, attracting also research, because I think the Arctic environment is very sensitive to change. And I think we need to understand the environment and the human and non-human interaction better in order to understand, what happens around us. And I think what is important in this research program is that we have this very sort of not a very common combination of fields coming together. And then at the same time, in my view, sustainability requires the sort of point of departure is transdisciplinarity. We need to sort of work across, otherwise we don't survive as a planet, as the creatures in the planet. But we as humans have bigger responsibility than non-humans. And we have the channels and opportunities for collaboration. And as Oulu, we can boost. We do need research, top research, in order to show what knowledge we can create. So this is a great challenge, I think. But then I think a great opportunity to also boost research that is not maybe going the traditional lines.
Yeah. And Heikki?
Yeah, I mean, at the very very practical level, I think the current academic atmosphere doesn't, or it seems to, or at least people think that it encourages very narrow thinking and focusing on one thing and doing that as well as possible. And in the long run, especially with big questions, or the biggest question we are dealing with now, that's in the long run that's counterproductive. It leads to people narrowing more and more and talking less and less to each other, and that's not good in the long run. So I think this having the different faculties under the same roof and physically close to each other also facilitates the interactions and maybe even or beyond these 6 years there hopefully will be a culture of people being more open in what seminars they attend and who they talk to, but creating that kind of an atmosphere and tradition, it takes a lot of effort to make people realize that it is worthwhile and good for your mind probably as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so overall, would you say that Oulu is active in environmental work, maybe not only at local level, but also international level?
Yes, so certainly, and our viewpoint, I guess mainly, or at least prominently, is this kind of an Arctic perspective. Like Elina was mentioning, we have certain sort of responsibility in regard with Arctic questions, and that's also universities' sort of will that we do that. And of course, Arctic is a global matter. We sometimes who sort of live in the sort of fairly far in the north, we sometimes tend to think that we live in a periphery or some, you know, on the margins of the world, but actually it's a very sort of central question, as we know that these global changes, climate change especially, is, of course, it's a global thing, but it's affecting very prominently the Arctic, and we are also talking about things like the global Arctic, which clearly indicates that it is a common matter, a global matter, and not just some kind of regional or local thing. So from that point of view, at very least, we are doing also international and sort of global research, but starting from a different viewpoint from we have our specific sort of viewpoint, Northern Arctic viewpoint on things.
Yeah. Elina.
Yes, and I think it's also very important, like you, Vesa-Pekka, you mentioned also this, that yes, we have the specific viewpoint here, and then at the same time, especially in my field, which is global educational learning, I want to also understand what are the connections between the local and the global, and then I think this is about positioning ourselves also in the planet, in the world, in the universe, if you like. And I think these are the important things also when we think about people's identities and people's growing, and that comes to cultural and social sustainability. And that comes where we need to understand that how all these different dimensions are connected. And this interconnectedness is something that the international researchers, independent researchers emphasized when it comes to sustainability, that we need to look at the interaction between different sustainable goals, but also different fields. And this is essentially what we are doing. So we need to do this program well, so that we can also highlight what this kind of 6 years investment means when it comes also to the university's own research sort of competencies and the competencies to attract people to work with us, not only researchers but also the public.
Perfect. Heikki.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a relative newcomer in University of Oulu, and I think my impression is that the university is very well connected to both the stakeholders and then the Arctic research globally, but then also, like Marco's insect biodiversity genomics is also very active in the international barcode of life approach, which is not, of course, not only limited to the Arctic, but to the biodiversity in general. So I think the balance of local and global connections is very good in Oulu.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Now, one more question to wrap up our discussion, and that's about Oulu University, and more specifically, what is the most amazing thing about it, in your opinion? Heikki, then, can we start from you?
Well,
even somebody fresh, as you say, to the university.
Well, I mean, at the moment, it's definitely all the opportunities I'm seeing right here. So very easy to answer.
Thank you, Elina.
Yes, and I think collaboration is easy. I think we have very low thresholds, so I can easily contact, and then there's been quite a lot of, I've been here now just over 3 years, and I think it's been easy to collaborate across different disciplines. I've enjoyed very much chairing the sustainability working group, where we do have people from all different fields, and I think also from student union, and that's, I think, very important. This type of sort of what I call really sort of enthusiastic collaboration. So this has been not difficult here, and I think easier maybe than in some other contexts to reach across different fields. And I think that's very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would continue from that. It's the for me the answer is also very clear. It's the vibrancy of the community and easiness to talk to people from different fields, which is also spatially made possible by the campus itself. But I would say that yes, this kind of open-mindedness and curiosity and people becoming excited over new things is something that I find very sort of distinctive to the University of Oulu.
Perfect. So I really hope that our discussion and the presentations we've had before will attract further cooperation within the university, but also internationally. So I would like to thank you all, Heikki Helantera, Elina Lehtomäki, Vesa-Pekka Herva. Thank you very much for the roundtable. And now I'll pass the microphone, so to speak, to Roger Norum, who's the vice leader of the program, and we'll wrap up this event with some concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you all for a really stimulating discussion. My name is Roger Norum. I'm a docent in geography and university lecturer in cultural anthropology at the University of Oulu, and I am the vice leader of our Biodiverse Anthropocenes research program. I'd first like to just say thank you to all of my colleagues for making today happen, to Laura for running and moderating the show, to Marco for his inspiring introduction, and to all of my colleagues from the university who presented and spoke about their interesting research today. So as you've heard over the past couple of hours, research on the environment and on biodiversity at the University of Oulu and in our Biodiverse Anthropocenes research program covers a really broad range of research topics and focuses. We listened to Pauliina, who spoke about her work engaging animals and children and the public, to Sami, who spoke about evolutionary diversity in insect species adaptation, to Anna-Kaisa speak about her really interesting work on reindeer histories in the Arctic, and indeed in the importance of thinking about reindeer as active participants in history and in research. And to Joni, who spoke about how we might link biodiversity and human health and well-being. So a fantastic diversity in disciplines and in modes of knowing fall under the rubric of what Biodiverse Anthropocenes is. It should be clear by now, hopefully, that we've designed this program to generate research that looks with different perspectives at how we can better understand connections between biodiversity and society, and better understand the ecological, social, and cultural challenges that we face going forward. And not just understand them, but also look to how we might resolve them. Now, this might all seem like a lot of different approaches to fit under one roof, but bringing together diverse and occasionally discordant ideas is precisely what we wanted to do when we wrote this funding application over a year ago. We wanted to show that researching the environment, researching biodiversity loss, researching societal and ecological sustainabilities can be done in many different ways and by many different types of scholars. We want to celebrate this difference, celebrate this diversity, and offer such scholars the opportunity to meet and work and talk together. And so one of the main points of departure for our new research program, and I think one of the reasons why we were so successful in being funded by the Academy of Finland for it, is the acknowledgement that in order to address the key challenges that our society faces, we need to find ways to break down the institutional constraints to doing rigorous, impactful, and transdisciplinary research. Constraints that are ingrained in the academic institutions that house us, constraints that are only strengthened by the disciplines that we work from. A key first step for us to overcome is Gary Brewer's observation from his 1999 article, The Challenges of Interdisciplinarity, in which he remarked that, quote, "The world has problems, but universities have departments." end quote. Now, this is not to suggest that disciplines are no longer needed. They are. They enable us to train in ways that encourage scientific success. We learn specific scientific ways of doing research, of using particular methodological tools, theoretical frameworks. We learn to read important canons of literature. These are all important things. But we need also to combine the rigor and integrity that come from these methods and these knowledges in our individual disciplines with something of a synoptic perspective and vigorous transdisciplinary debate, such as some of which I think you've seen here today. The practice of mobilizing methods from across a range of disciplines and deploying them in a participatory manner is now recognized as a key way of addressing the complex so-called wicked environmental problems facing modern societies. Wicked problems are when you have different people perceiving varying versions of the same problem based on their own particular values and ideologies. These are large-scale, often large-scale long-term policy dilemmas where multiple compounding risks and uncertainties combine with sharply divergent public values. The key challenges facing us all, such as climate change and biodiversity loss that is accelerating in some places and decreasing in others, are classic examples of these wicked problems. Both are driven by a complex interplay of anthropogenic pressures which have significant impacts at the planetary level on both climate and ecosystems, increasing the probability of abrupt and irreversible environmental change. So with Biodiverse Anthropocenes, we are building a program that brings diverse scholars who speak different languages together, not just to talk in the same room as we've done here today, but to research together, conceive ideas together, write together, think together. It sounds quite daunting to those of us who have worked in our comfort zones for so long, because these comfort zones are comfortable, and because they work for us, at least to some extent. But it's also important to step back, step sideways, and pause for a while to think, reflect, and critique one's own ways of seeing the world and doing research, in order to then be able to leap forwards. And for this, I think we need to embrace the unpredictability which Heikki mentioned in the roundtable discussion. And that is one of the key things that we're hoping to do over the next 6 years with our Biodiverse Anthropocenes program, to give researchers who dare a bit to think outside of their own work the opportunity to experiment, to guess, to try, and to fail. And of course, failure is extremely important to success. Just ask J.K. Rowling or Albert Einstein. And we want to do this in a collegial community that is supportive of setbacks while also being driven to succeed. So what does this mean in practice? In practice, it means that we could have a plant biologist working on historical change of the forest floor, sharing an office with an anthropologist studying how people experience that forest, and a geographer studying local forest land politics or policy-making processes about land use. And hopefully persuading them not just to share an office together, but to spend some time in the forest together too, because we want to put all these researchers together, not just so that they can work on writing and publishing amazing articles in Science and Nature, but also so that they can get to know each other a bit and learn how each other thinks, and maybe learn about the scientific language and understandings and presuppositions that each brings to their research on the environment. And that does not, of course, always happen effectively if we are sat at beige desks made out of MDF under fluorescent lighting. Our hope in putting together all these researchers into one house for 6 years, and I mean house metaphorically, is to create space for doing great research and to build a lively community at this university that is a great place to work and think. And even more than this, we want to encourage people working at the university to also involve people working outside the university in their research, to move towards genuine transdisciplinarity, where science and scientists talk to and with the public and a diverse range of people outside of the ivory tower. This kind of citizen science, and indeed the kind of critical public engagement that I think Paulina spoke about in her talk today, I think will help us learn about how to apply the knowledge that we develop inside our house to the wider world outside. And this is indeed part of the reason we're here right now at this university pop-up space in bustling downtown Oulu, to push scientists a bit out of the lab and into the city center. Another thing that we want to do is bring together scholars who work on the Arctic with scholars who work outside the Arctic, something which showed up in a few of the talks this morning. The importance of the Arctic to today's world cannot be overstated. The region has 10% of the world's undiscovered oil and possibly as much as 30% of its undiscovered gas reserves. The melting of Arctic ice shows up in newspaper headlines almost daily and is consistently reaching new peaks. This melting is not just a geophysical indicator of global climate effects, but also an emblematic bellwether or a poster child of planetary change. Others look at and to the Arctic to see what might happen in other parts of the world. This Arctic has also taken on key economic and geopolitical significance. We see this in moves to open the Northern Passage to shipping routes, in processes of flag planting by various nations on the Arctic Ocean floor, and intense debates over territorial rights linked to oil and gas extraction, mineral mining, and coastal fishing. The Arctic has also become particularly important to pan-European concerns and to Europe's position in a global world, speaking to increasing ecological and political concerns and to anxieties over Europe's centers and its peripheries. As Vesa-Pekka wrote in our successful proposal, the Arctic is for many researchers a unique laboratory and a gallery for observing, measuring, analyzing, and interpreting the Anthropocene. This has, of course, led to a surge in the number of scholars, publications, courses, study programs, degrees, and even entire institutions who place the Arctic in their name and take the Arctic as their core focus. Oulu is indeed one of those institutions which has a core competency in the Arctic. Researchers here work on northern environmental histories, presents, and futures, examining the role that the polar regions play in both climate change and its societal responses, and how these speak to planetary Anthropocenic natures more broadly. For example, the university has launched the Nordic country's first cross-institutional environmental humanities undergraduate minor, of which much of the focus is on the north. With understanding that all this knowing about the region's past, we can help envision a better future for us all. So what we want from Biodiverse Anthropocenes is to share all of this Arctic knowledge with scholars from other parts of the world, and for Arctic scholars to also learn from researchers doing work on other regions, particularly in the global south. This notion of exchange is at the core ethos of Biodiverse Anthropocenes. As Marco outlined at the beginning of this event, we will be organizing many initiatives over the next few years that we hope will encourage people out there, both at the university and beyond, to take part in. We have job announcements for 4 new tenure-track positions coming out in the next several weeks, as well as postdocs and other funding opportunities. We will also soon be launching our new Biodiversity and Society Visiting Fellows program, and our hope with this is to encourage people to visit us here in Oulu, either for a couple of weeks or for an entire semester, in order to collaborate with our researchers. And again, the idea here is not to keep visitors in a bubble with those in their own discipline in a single corridor, but to integrate them into the wider community of biodiverse Anthropocene scholars in other fields, and also hopefully get them out into Finnish nature. So if you are a member of the university, whether a researcher or a doctoral student, a doctoral researcher, please join us by becoming an affiliated member of Biodiverse Anthropocenes. You can find out how from our university webpage. And if you're from outside the university, please follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is Arctic Ants. And with that, I will draw our little launch event here in northern Finland to a close. Thank you to all of you for watching. We look forward to seeing you in the